Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to the New Vibrant You podcast. I'm Jenny Miller, holistic wellness coach, vibrant energy practitioner, and now a health, freedom, and truth activist. My mission is to empower people with the information and tools that can assist them in being the most resilient and joyful version of themselves. I've got many tools available to you if you're feeling things like fatigued, anxious, unfulfilled, or even confused. My favorite and most popular modalities are Psych K, which can quickly reprogram your subconscious mindset, which is often the root cause of self-sabotage, the emotion and the body code to release negative energies and trapped emotions from your biofield, heart math techniques, and bioenergetic scanning and tuning. You can learn more about how I work with clients in both private online sessions as well as through comprehensive individualized programs at my website, newvibrantyou.com. About 9 months ago, due to this global situation we're all dealing with, I helped form a group in my area of California called Health Freedom Monterey. And I've also become a volunteer ambassador for my county for Children's Health Defense. And that's RFK Jr.'s nonprofit organization that is just incredible. I highly recommend you get on their newsletter if you're not already. So today's New Vibrant You podcast will be an interview with a new friend of mine, Jonathan Rogers. How you doing, Jonathan?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for being here. So thrilled to be able to ask you all these great questions. So I'm going to read a little bit about Jonathan here. He is a digital designer, both of websites as well as graphics. And he's part of Dr. Andrew Kaufman's support team for their new platform called True Medicine. Furthermore, Jonathan has always had an affinity for words. He's done extensive research in the field of etymology, which is the study of the origin of words. So I just recently learned about this through speaking with Jonathan. And I realize there's so much to that whole field that we're going to do a separate podcast just on this fascinating area of his expertise. So I recently had the pleasure to connect with Jonathan through just what I call pure serendipity. It's just amazing. And I was thrilled to learn that he actually lives close to me in the Monterey Bay area of California. And I'm very honored that he has joined our Health Freedom Monterey group, and he's going to be one of our guest speakers at our next in-person meeting. Now, if there's anyone out there who's not familiar yet with Dr. Andrew Kaufman, which is hard to believe because he's doing a lot of interviews. I've been following him since the very beginning of this whole global situation, and I'm a huge, huge fan. But just briefly, he is a forensic psychiatrist, a natural healing consultant, an expert witness, a public speaker, and even an inventor. He has become very well known in the health, freedom, and truth sectors as one of the top experts speaking about this idea that germ theory, and even more specifically, virus theory, is merely that, a theory, and that it has not been proven even to this day. You can find out more about him on his website, andrewkaufmanmd.com, and you can check out the movie that he recently co-produced with Marcelena Cravat at terrainthefilm.com. And I'll have links to both of those sites in the show notes. Movie everyone needs to see. So one of the most important and empowering messages I believe I can spread at this time is that it is time for us all to at least consider, and then, you know, if you can consider it and open your mind, then go in and thoroughly research this huge potential paradigm shift from germ theory to what's known as terrain medicine. So these concepts that Dr. Kaufman, along with now many others, and just to name a few, Dr. Thomas Cowan, Dr. Stefan Lenka, Dr. Samantha Bailey, and Dr. Robert O. Young, that they have been discussing, and they assert that the idea that germs are a major cause of disease is actually not proven to be true. And there is actually much more evidence that the inner and outer environment or terrain that our bodies exist in is what is determining one's health status. So I believe that this shift in our mass consciousness needs to happen to fully empower humanity so that we no longer can be fooled and frightened into submitting to the just horrendous loss of our human rights that we've all experienced in the name of saving ourselves from disease and death, as well as under this guise of being kind of an obligatory, noble, and compassionate thing to do as a member of society. If we do not transcend this concept that germs are the scary cause of disease, the controlling powers of the world will, in my opinion, never stop orchestrating the unending series of fake crisis pandemics for their fake infections diagnosed by fake tests. And, I have found that even people, my fellow comrades, so to speak, in the health, freedom, truth movement are still talking about COVID-19 and these various testing methods as being valid and proven concepts, which I don't think they are. So Jonathan is, just so you all know, he's not a health professional and he will not be giving any advice in that realm. However, because he works closely with Dr. Kaufman on his many projects and research, Jonathan has intimate knowledge about these subjects, as well as his own research he's been doing his whole life. So I'd like to spend this interview time with Jonathan discussing the following. So I'm just going to outline it briefly, and then we'll go into the questions. So one, kind of in general, what are some of the ways Dr. Kaufman started to awaken to the benefits of holistic natural healing, specifically nutrition, especially, versus the pharmaceutical route. And in case there are people here that are really just brand new to this concept we're talking about, germ theory versus trained medicine, maybe, just an overview on those two concepts and virus isolation. And then what Jonathan and Dr. Kaufman get asked all the time is, well, if the consensus of experts, of people around the world are saying these things, why should we doubt it if they're all supposedly on board with it? 3 would be, if there is no deadly virus, why are all these people dying? And then 4, we'd like to just know a little bit more about how you, Jonathan, support Dr. Kaufman in his efforts to serve people and inform them. So let's go back up to number 1, unless there's something you'd like to interject.
No, you're doing just fine.
Okay, great. So number 1, everybody in the holistic healthcare field that I've talked to, including myself, have always had kind of some awakening events or moments in their life that have changed them from thinking of, traditional conventional medicine ways versus looking at options and going, aha, maybe there's a better way. So in general, what would you like to share about Dr. Kaufman's awakening in that realm?
Like most of us, it's almost as if we were introduced and born into a sea of lies. And then as we learn to swim and navigate those waters, we start to have these smaller to greater epiphanies and things. And it seems to be more like a domino or a cascade effect where it starts with one thing and then it's like, well, I discovered the truth of that. What else am I being lied to about? And so in his particular case, coming out of medical school, and He got a job in psychiatry helping at a particular school with kids that were problematic. And he was the resident psychiatrist there. And these kids were all on pharmaceuticals as per usual. And it through his research, and he's an avid researcher, he's constantly doing this, he's got an extreme analytical mind. So he started looking into, well, I guess what really triggered it was these kids weren't improving. You know, the meds were not helping them as proposed. And so he did some research into nutrition, and he figured that he could probably get these kids off of pharmaceuticals and into better nutrition, which would have the desired effect. And he approached his bosses at the time, and they said, well, take a few kids, try it out. And based on those results, we'll take it from there. Well, he had such great success. They said, go for it. That'll be the de facto way of, or de jure way of doing it. So, and there he was until the COVID era, and then he went on to bigger and better things, as we well know.
Yeah, well, that's amazing that they even let him do that. I'm, pretty
Yeah,
impressed.
no, I was surprised when I heard that too. Usually
Yeah,
it's no.
right, right. Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. And I think I heard him once say that he read Dr. Kelly Brogan's book about how when you look at the research on psych meds, there's no proof that they do anything if you know beneficial. And there's a lot of proof that they can be very harmful. So that probably kind of
Oh yeah.
thinking too. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So in a nutshell, what do we mean when we say germ theory and this concept that these, revolutionary doctors now are talking about, that there's never been a virus in particular that's been purified and isolated, shown to actually cause a specific disease?
Yeah, so it's a big scope. So germ theory is this all-encompassing, thing. And until recently, it really wasn't referred to largely in the status quo as a theory. It was treated like a fact. But if we just take something as simple as the microbiome, which in the last 15 years, a lot of research has gone into, and now we have yogurt commercials that say, eat this to help your microbiome. And people are learning this new word called microbiome. Well, what does microbiome mean? Microbiome means you have microbes in you and on you that you have a symbiotic relationship with. So you might scratch your head and like, well, what are some of those critters? Well, they have all kinds of, Greek and Latin names. I think they're probably mostly Latin, but anyway. And so, for instance, if we hear about a staph infection, ooh, that's bad. Yet we have staph. It's in us and it's on us. So then, what makes staph bad? So through all my research and Andy's as well, there's no such thing as a bad or good bacteria. There's just simply bacteria.
Mm.
And so what makes something bad is like in any culture, and that's what we are, kind of a walking petri dish with various cultures in us and on us. And so it's when something goes out of balance. So you take a neighborhood, and if it's diverse, we love it, right? Even in our own culture. So we can go down the street, go to an authentic Italian restaurant, an authentic Mexican restaurant. We love Korean food. My favorite is Thai. And we're having a good time because there's a variety of cultures mixed, and we can enjoy the fruits of that. Well, when something happens rapidly, where let's say traditionally, I've experienced that, and now all I have are Korean restaurants or Mexican, take your pick, whichever one, and there's no variety anymore. There's an imbalance, and we're not as satisfied, and something's not quite right. So we may look to change that. Well, it's the same thing with our own systems. We need a delicate balance between all these things, depending on what we're up to, right? And now research has shown that a lot of these critters put off hormones and vitamins and minerals. So we get a lot of benefit by having them around. So to call them bad is kind of a ridiculous notion. And that goes along with some of these that are scary names like E. coli. Well, we have that. We just want to make sure it's in check, and having other cultures within that and around that makes their job and us healthy. So um, so that's one clue that the microbiome exists. So if we could use that as a model, then we wouldn't need to be afraid or germophobic, you know. And my other argument is, well, if this is all true, such as SARS-CoV-2 and germs being dangerous for us, how did we get here? How did we survive this long to get to this point to even question it? We've been surviving this whole time, you know? So, and I think there's a lot to be said about pop culture as well. I don't know if you've noticed within the last, it's escalated, but I'd say about 15 to 10 years, the extent or the amount of, I should say, zombie movies or zombie series. It's like everyone's zombie crazy. And
Right.
what I find very interesting is back in the day when the whole concept of zombies came into pop culture, it was some voodoo doctor did something and it was a magical event where the dead came back to life and sought out brains, right? Whereas they changed it recently to be viral, I
Mhm.
guess, to make it more sci-fi or scientific, if you will. But yet, if you think about it, that goes into the mind, and it definitely goes into the subconscious mind, and it prepares one's mind to accept that maybe in the future that scenario could indeed happen.
Yes.
And if you notice, there was a ramp up of that type of material, zombie material, up until SARS-CoV-2.
Yeah, it's not just zombies.
Um,
There are so many movies and TV shows. I mean, now we've got Netflix and Hulu and all that. I go through sometimes just trying to figure out, where is a decent program to watch. And there are so many that are all about some horrible, deadly virus that, is wiping out humanity. And you take it and immediately your blood coagulates and you turn into this weird thing. I mean, it's just like so obvious that they're trying
my
to.
favorite one was, I think, oh, no problem. My favorite, I think, was World War Z, where it was like it took 30 seconds for an infection.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, you would touch somebody and it was like cascading like a tidal wave through the city. But anyway,
yeah, I know. Yeah. So they're definitely trying to implant that fear into our consciousness. So, so I guess what these doctors are questioning is what started, I don't know, maybe it was 150 years ago with, Pasteur and them that were the ones.
yeah, I would say, yeah, that's, yeah, 120, maybe to 150. Yeah, yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
That's Béchamp and Pasteur, which both were French. And in a nutshell, because I've just left that up to Andy to explain to other people. But essentially, that's the birth of germ theory. There were people prior to him, but it didn't quite catch on until he, uh, made it popular, and he was politically connected, and they immediately knew that they could control people with this information,
Yeah.
control populations, and they could make money on it. And what's interesting is the guy that started Greenpeace made an observation similar to the observations we have made, which is every time there's something in the media, it seems to be that it's based on that which is remote or invisible, and therefore difficult for us to prove whether it's true or not.
Hmm.
So he wrote a book, I think, Fake Catastrophes, and his name's Patrick Moore. And on the back cover, he explains that it occurred in one day, like polar bears and the losing their home. Well, there's other stats that we can go find that say that's wrong. Polar bears are thriving and doing fine.
Hmm.
The coral reefs. Well, I'm nowhere near the Great Barrier Reef, And it would take a good amount of effort to get there and check it out for myself, and time. And so how much, none of us are that level of researcher, you know? And of course, if you are getting grants and there's money to be made for you to study a particular angle
Mm.
or a particular narrative, then that's your shortcut to stability and security, right? So I don't blame some of these people that go after uh, the wrong fox, if you will, you know, in the hunt. So,
Yeah, yeah. And
but going back to Bishop, sure, yeah. Um, and there, of course, there's a supposed confessional deathbed
right.
confession. I should
Yeah,
say, I should
I
word
heard
it that
that.
way, where Pasteur said, you know, the terrain is everything. And
Yeah.
so the difference between really, well, you know, here, let me give this example, because this is brought up a lot. So right around the late 1800s, you would have a general practitioner who would do an autopsy, and then some nurse would run in and say, "Doctor, she's going into labor." And then he'd run over and he'd deliver the baby. Now, sometimes the mother would get a fever, or the baby would get a fever, or the baby would die, or the mother would die, or combinations thereof. Some of those types of tragedies. Well, when they instituted the practice of washing hands, that dramatically fell. Therefore, proof that germs from the dead body are being transferred to the baby and or mother and causing them illness. So here's where we get into a technicality, and I think this is where a lot of people get caught up in, and that is, technically speaking, it's not the germ, although the germ is present. Like, you know, you're very well aware of Tom Cowan's illustration of, there's a house on fire, and every time I go investigate, there's these guys with hoses squirting water on it, so it must be their fault,
Right.
right? Well, bacteria have a job to do, and their job is to eat necrotic tissue and or toxins, and to process that into a form that is more easily handleable. You think of them as a processing plant, you know, and each one has its favorite thing to eat.
Mm.
So the dead cadaver, I guess there's only one kind of cadaver, right? Anyway,
Unless you're a
so
zombie.
yeah, exactly. Speaking of zombies, so your hands are in there, and you are essentially bathing in bacterial poop, which is
Toxic.
toxins.
Right.
And if you have any experience with, I don't mean personal experience, but if you know of how little bit of a toxin it takes to have an effect, just like I find it hard to imagine that LSD can have this huge effect on you when it's this little tiny
Mm.
tab of paper that's barely visible. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't take much. So imagine this doctor loaded with toxins. Yeah, and he does transfer some of the critters too, but it's not the critters themselves. It's the fact that there's toxins on his hands, and he's transferring it to people that
Right.
cannot deal with it, right?
Yeah.
So by the sheer practice, this is where two sides of the equation can agree.
Mm.
Germ theorists and terrain theorists can say, wash your hands, especially doing certain activities like a doctor would, you know. So um, that's, I think, where people mostly get caught up in, is like, well, you know, I know for a fact the doctor told me this or that or the other thing when it comes to staph infection from the hospital, you know. But what's funny, most people get staph from the hospital. It's
Right.
like a breeding ground for staph. I mean, my mom went to the hospital. She came back with staph and had to be treated. My dad, same thing. So it seems to be a regular occurring event. So what's taking place there, you know?
Yeah.
But
So yeah, through my study of microbiome, it appears to be more about balance. And if there's some kind of condition, environment in the body that is favoring an overgrowth of a microbe, I won't even call it a pathogen anymore, but a microbe that can just be opportunistic and take advantage of that condition and grow more than you should have in your body and produce toxins, that's the problem. And so a hospital situation, you've been given medication, you're under stress, and they're spraying it with disinfectant, and you got antibiotics, and you had surgery, that's a situation where you're ripe for an overgrowth of an opportunistic microbe, whether it's a bacteria or
And
something else.
that's well said. Well, yeah, well said. Because that really, in a nutshell, what you described is terrain. It's not one thing. It's a series of things. It's the environment. So you can exchange the word terrain for environment. You can say it's environmental theory if you wanted to, because it's your mental condition, your emotional condition, your physical condition, the air you breathe, the water you drink, the food that you're taking in, lack of nutrition, or whatever. So within terrain, there's always these two things present. Either there's a deficiency or there's a toxicity.
Okay.
And usually it's going to be a combination of those two. So you're not getting the right nutrition into your body. You're eating too many Big Macs, and you're not drinking enough water. You're consuming high fructose corn syrup in a soda, and so then your boss is on your butt all the time. Your um, your parents are telling you to get a real job. I mean, you're not making enough money. The rent's due. Electricity is going to get turned off. It's like you add it all up. Wow, that's amazing. It really proves how resilient the human condition really is, that
Yeah.
we can undergo all these assaults and still be okay, relatively speaking,
Right. Within reason, depending upon
within reason. Yeah.
what your coping skills are and what else you can do to support your body. But that's a good point in that with everything that's going on today, the fear, stuff that's going on with people just being so afraid to go out of their house without two diapers on their face and
Oh,
injected
yeah, yeah.
getting injected with these experimental
Well, and a really interesting note, and a lot of people don't talk about on the mask thing, other than, you can just very simply reason it out and go, this is ridiculous. Um, is that a set of surgeons, I do believe in the UK, in connection with the US and Canada, decided, and this is prior to this whole thing going on, I think it was 2003 or 2008, so don't quote me on that.
okay.
But they wanted to know, and these were surgeons, would wearing a mask or not wearing a mask improve the rate of post-operative infections? And so through the whole course of the study, now that's kind of funny though, if you think about it, because if you went under the knife and the doctor said, hey, you want to be part of a study? None of us are going to wear masks. We're going to cut you open. You'd be like, well, they did conduct this experiment and they found that it was a 1% decrease in post-operative infections. Now that makes no sense under the current paradigm of germ theory. It should be off the charts. Like, you nearly killed everybody when you didn't wear a mask.
Yeah.
So that's professionals prior to all of this. But then you've got this whole thing. Perhaps you recall when you first learned about viruses, like in grade school or whatever, we understood that they were machines, essentially like biological machines. They weren't alive and they had no mobility. They required a some sort of conveyance through a cell or whatever. So it makes no sense that something that's not living, they would use the terminology such as, well, coronavirus lives on surfaces for up to 15 minutes. Well, wait a second. It's already not living. So what do
Yeah.
you mean by that?
Yeah.
You know? And the fact that I just heard a commercial. It came on our local radio station while driving the car, and it says the Omicron variant spreads far faster than SARS-CoV-2. Well, it has no mobility. So how is it spreading faster? But it just gives you an example of how they just throw anything out there. There's no responsibility to the information. It's selling, in this case, a thermometer, you know, but selling the vaccine, selling a pharmaceutical. I mean, even ivermectin is not necessary. I mean, it may have some benefits, maybe for removing various parasites in the body, but it's not for SARS-CoV-2, especially when you know that no one has isolated not only SARS-CoV-2, but no virus.
Right.
No virus can be obtained to uh, purchase and then do your own laboratory tests on. They do not exist.
Yeah. So
Nothing's
that's
been
what I,
isolated. I think we're up to what, 168 now, different health organizations that have been contacted with the FOIA request, the Freedom of Information requests,
right.
and it comes back the same way every single time. Sorry, we don't have it.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted you to say for people to hear that are new to this concept, that even though, you can Google this, they're trying to negate what Dr. Kaufman and others are saying
Mhm.
by semantics, basically, because they are putting a twist on what isolation is now. They're changing the definition.
Yeah,
But but
and this is
but
not new.
but yeah, what these
Yeah, this is a tactic that's always used, just like, for instance, polio. Um, they always use the argument, if it weren't for vaccinations and science, we would have never eradicated polio. And it's like, no, not so. Now, hold up a second. All you have to do, and your audience can do this, look up polio and meningitis. This is a tactic that's always used. It's a word game. So, has polio been eradicated? No. You know what they decided to do is simply stop using the term polio and start using the term meningitis. Voila, instant cure.
hmm,
And they do that with lots of things. Yeah.
wow. Okay, well, that's where
Hmm.
your study.
And it's that information is very easily found. Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Did I
mind.
stump you on that?
Yeah, but when and Jonathan and I are not experts the way Dr. Kaufman is in explaining it. That's why you got to watch Terrain, the film, if you really want to understand this. But if you look at the way science set up, trying to prove that a particular pathogen causes a specific disease with these specific symptoms that is, consistent and universal with everybody, animal or person that is exposed to it, no one has fulfilled that criteria, whether it's Koch's postulate or there's the other one that was more recently developed. No one really has done the purification and isolation that should be done to make that claim that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this particle caused this disease. And so it's a deep dive for sure, but I really feel it's worth trying to understand so that you can't be hoodwinked by all the detractors who are saying, oh no, they're full of baloney. We have isolated. Here's the picture of it right here, which is a computer version, right? The red thing with
Yeah,
the
and that's referred to as, yeah, that term is referred to as in silico, which is what they refer to as New Latin. It had to be created since Latin's a dead language. They needed to create a new Latin word. So it's called in silico, which simply means silicon, means in the computer. It's a computer simulation. So, I mean, what if I told you, you've got this disease called wackadoodle, and I ran a computer simulation and it says, you've got it. I mean, it's gotten that bad. In other words, it's this appeal to authority. It's a logical fallacy. The problem is ours. We've made these assumptions, right? Where I don't have time. I got to go do my job. I got to come home and cater to the kids and make dinner. And now I got to get my rest. I got to go to the gym. You are so busy being busy,
yeah.
you have no time to check out for yourself, to take responsibility and take accountability over your own body and your own health. So the shortcut is, I go to this guy in a white coat. He says, take this pill. I take it. I'm done. I'm go back to my, rat race. Well, and that's what makes answering the question, if there is no SARS-CoV-2, then what is making people sick and or dying? It is a loaded question.
Mm.
First of all, just the question itself assumes that uh, people are getting sick and dying. Well, compared to what? We always have the sick and dying with us. You mean from a specific thing? Oh, well, then now we can go into, now if we can establish that SARS-CoV-2 has not been isolated, now we've got a problem. But people still scratching their head because it's a well ingrained thing that germs and meaning bacteria and viruses are pathogenic, therefore they are the cause of things. And so we now go into philosophy of cause and effect. And your ability to accept an idea or belief, and I should add that belief is a Germanic word, and at its root is called Liebe, or love. So a belief is an idea that you are very in love with. In fact, probably so much so that you're willing to die for your belief.
Mm.
Um, it's attached to ego because you've made a choice to adopt that belief. And if someone comes along and challenges it, it's almost as though they're trying to kill you
Mm.
or
Wow.
kill your beloved creation or adaptation or whatever. And so, what people have to do is just be willing to absolutely question everything. A question isn't dangerous. We should always be asking, well, what if? What if Andrew Kaufman is true? What if he's right? What if he's correct on the statement? And then we've got this logical fallacy that is, this bandwagon fallacy, which is, well, everyone says it's so, so it must be true. Well,
Right.
just
Census.
stick with that for a minute.
Right.
And in fact, ask yourself this question. Have you ever been at work or at school or at dinner with friends and everyone's going on and on about something which you know the facts about, and you raise your hand or interrupt and say, no, that's not true, it's this, and they all look at you and think you're out in left field, or they just dismiss you and say, oh well, which gets into another logical fallacy. You may be the victim of an ad hominem attack. It's like when someone is running down the street yelling, fire, fire, call 911, and I turn to you and I say, oh, don't listen to him, he can't be trusted, he's a rapist. What does call 911 for a fire have anything to do with, so it's these character attacks, right?
Mhm.
And I'm sure we've seen lots of movies too where there's the crazy scientist in his basement and he's figured something out and everyone says he's crazy. Well, consensus says he's crazy. That's called a bandwagon fallacy, right? um, but the other part of it is this assumption, right? So it's like begging the question. So if there is no SARS-CoV-2 virus, then what's making people sick is actually layers of assumption. And one of the things I like to try and help people with is cosmogony is the study of how we got here or how the universe even began in the first place. And so if you can believe or agree to the idea or notion that something came out of nothing and then cause effect, and then here we are today, and me talking to you on camera, just nothing but a series of cause and effects, then you can believe in this evolutionary process of a virus particle, this invisible thing that kind of came along with humanity and then one day just got really angry or something, but yet it's not alive. So does it have consciousness? And so here's one of these things that has just started. Now there's a debate within science, and I would rather use the term scientism because it is a belief system, because science is a methodology, right? And it does work to tease out what's happening in the physical realm of physical phenomena. Whereas scientism is a religious belief system that all of science is this awesome thing and it needs to be adhered to because it's the only explanation of truth, which is proven, especially in the last 2 years, to be no, not so. You know, but yeah, cosmology, what you believe, what you um, love as an idea, uh, dictates what you will accept as another belief system that comes along. So it's a belief system upon belief system upon belief system, and it can go quite far. So it's very beneficial just to lay waste to this house of beliefs and start adopting a policy called holding ideas. Belief, I would say, is like an anvil. You're attached to it. You can kind of get around the room, but you're limited. Whereas if you cut that cord, kick the kick the anvil away if you can, and start holding ideas, because in my opinion, ideas are like feathers, lightweight, and you can hold a fistful of them. Now, if a new feather comes along that's a better, newer idea, I can actually drop the whole fistful of feathers and carry the new one.
Hmm.
So just because people are asking a question, is this so? Is this true? We shouldn't run away from it. We should go, yeah, let's adopt it. In fact, prior to radio and television, what gentlemen and ladies would do is they'd have dinner parties. Now, what was that all about? It was about entertainment. What was the entertainment? Discussion.
Mm.
So it would not be unusual to ask over for dinner a couple or a gentleman that is very controversial. In fact, you don't really believe a lot of the ideas that he presents, but oh my goodness, is it entertaining? And everyone gets to learn something from that. Whereas nowadays, there's an attack on information. There's now good and bad information, and they want to sell you on good and bad bacteria. It's always polarity. They're trying to constantly give you, it can only be this and it can only be that. You only have two choices. It's Democrat or Republican. It's red or it's blue. And that's part of the attack on our very basic, mysterious understandings that we've inherited from the ancient past, is that polarity exists and it's there as a tool. For instance, like, we say it's hot and cold. Well, what is that? It's a relationship. Is there really anything as hot and cold? If I put on a hot pack and go, ooh, that's hot, and I travel to the sun, that's a very different type of hot. In fact, I would say the hot pack is cold in comparison, right? And so what we really have is not hot and cold. Those are ideas. What we have is something called temperature, right? That's really what we have. And so by mapping out the poles and the relationships, we get to learn just what it really means to be human. What's this whole adventure about? But anyway, like I said, we can really, this opens up so many avenues of discussion. What came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, and it can get very
So I'll give it
nuanced.
back to you, put it back on course. What's
No,
that?
thank you. No, I'm pointing out that what you just talked about shows that a lot of this is very nuanced, and it's not black and white. It's not good, bad polarity, which is for a lot of people hard to even explore because, like you said, I think part of the agenda is, make it so you have to work so hard every day. Some people working 2 to 3 jobs. They've got daycare for their kids. They're barely getting by with their bills. They're stressed out. They're sick. They're tired. They've got the TV screaming at them about all these emergencies that are going on. And now we've got this war in Ukraine. And so it's like their mind can't even calm down to start looking into things and doing the nuance, although they can stare at the TV for 2 hours, 3 hours every night because for them, it's like, it doesn't take any brain power while they're getting all these images and
Yeah.
on their consciousness.
Yeah.
But so,
Of course,
yeah,
they're watching the right stuff.
a friend of
Yeah,
mine,
they're
Bonnie,
they're allowing themselves to calm down.
yeah, I was just going to say, a friend of mine, Bonnie Munns, explained to me that she thinks there's 3 types of people in the world. First is people like maybe you and I who, are curious, really curious, and we don't have to get dogmatic about anything. We want to explore all options and talk about it and go as deep as we can. And then there are people who are on the other side of that who, I've got some family members that are like this right now, who follow either the party line or, they like to follow science, but only the science that aligns with what they already believe or who is in their approved group of scientists. And they can't go outside of that because it frightens them. They've actually told me I have to be able to trust these people. Otherwise, I don't know what to do with myself. So there's those people, and they won't listen to anything. Anything you and I say to them will just go right over their heads. They won't look at anything. They'll Google that Dr. Kaufman. Oh my God, he's been, demonized. I'm not going to look at him.
Oh yeah.
There's that group. And then there's a group in the middle. And these are the people that maybe we can help somehow, that have a little bit of curiosity. They maybe buy a lot of the story, but they're willing to at least explore a little bit. And those are the people we can plant seeds with and maybe slowly bring along, because it's probably shocking to a lot of their psyches, some of the stuff we're talking about, and so
Oh, indeed, yeah.
we have to nudge them along at their own pace, however they can get comfortable with some paradigm shifts.
And it's about sharing ideas. Like I said, there is no such thing as dangerous information. It's what the intent of the human heart is to do with that information. If no one knows anything about radioactivity, and yet I do, and I know how to generate it, and I have a grudge with somebody and I want to make their life miserable, I can put that information to use. But the information itself is not inherently good nor bad nor right nor wrong, and that's what people have to get over. And unfortunately, that's what we're kind of collectively teasing out right now, is this censorship problem, that there is such a thing as good or bad or right or wrong information. Now, sure, someone can be hateful and hate somebody and use pejorative language and attack somebody, sure, but that's their problem. And what our duty is to be resilient. And if we don't want to be in a situation where we're hearing that, then we remove ourselves from the situation. You have two legs, you have ears, we've got all kinds of technology now. We can shut everything out if we want.
Turn the TV off.
So it puts the responsibility back on the person. Yeah, it puts the responsibility back on the person. Come on, and like you were saying earlier, the problem is freedom versus security, or certainty versus uncertainty. We want a level of uncertainty in our lives, right? Let's start with certainty. We want a level of certainty. We want to know that when I drive my car, the wheels won't fall off, that I can get home, park in my driveway, not be molested by marauders. I can actually go to sleep and get some rest without someone breaking into the house, etc. We want that level of certainty or security. However, there's another side, and this is where these pole ideas come from, that we crave uncertainty. We don't want to know exactly what happens every single day. We want to be surprised. That's why there's something called a surprise party, or mysteries. Why do we read mysteries? No matter what they are. What if we just don't know something and there's a glimmer of something on the horizon that suggests we should be curious and we should look at something? That brings the zest back to life. So we need those things in balance, and bringing it back to terrain theory, that's what homeostasis is a great word to use. When you are out of homeostasis, there's a problem, a symptom shows up, and then it's informing you, hey, take a look at this, spend some energy, spend some time, figure this out, because something's amiss in your life as a whole system, not just a germ that came and snuck up behind you and attacked you. And see, that's another concept called the enemy construct. If I can convince you that there's so many things out to get you, then I come along and sell you the idea of security and certainty. Here, I'm going to put a shield around your house and you'll never be afraid again. Well, it's kind of an oxymoron. You need to be afraid in order to let me put a shield around you so that you won't be afraid. So I'm invoking fear in you, and that's That's an insidious thing. And if you really focus on all the world problems, it's a big, giant fear pump. That's what the mainstream media is all about. Let's move you to the next thing. Prior to SARS-CoV-2, I was asking the question, hey, whatever happened to AIDS? It was during the 80s and 90s, nonstop talk about AIDS. Then it disappeared. We never heard about it. And then SARS-CoV-2 comes along, and as it starts to wane, now we start hearing about AIDS again.
Mhm.
And then, oh, look, another shiny thing. Look, a war. Everything's fear, 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 fear. And so we really need to take on the mantle of responsibility and accountability, start turning things off, because and I know that the Matrix movies are a kind of a tired analogy, but one of my favorite scenes in there is in the second Matrix movie where the Merovingian has a piece of dessert given to a lady. Now he's up to some naughty things, but he explains that all it is information. He's only providing some code, right? I use this analogy to explain that absolutely everything that you take in with the senses is information that's informing your body to do or not do something. So what you hear and what you listen to stirs up thoughts, thoughts stir up emotions, and usually cause action, right? Same thing with the eyes, same thing with all the senses. And so it matters what you put in your mouth. Just because something is edible does not necessarily mean you should eat it, right? There's a guy in India, he makes a living in Guinness Book of World Records by eating glass. It's obviously glass is edible. I don't want to eat it. So again, more accountability and more responsibility. You have to find out what it is that your body needs and requires to keep you healthy in order to explore what it means to be human, and to really, it's like if you're not curious at all about anything or very little, you are not concerned with truth, and therefore you are not concerned with life. You're just kind of a cog in a machine, just existing without purpose or meaning. And you know, like I said, this conversation here, we're talking about SARS-CoV-2, but it dovetails into absolutely everything, because again, that question is loaded. If SARS-CoV-2 virus does not exist, and if no viruses have ever been isolated, then why are so many people dying? It dovetails with media, what we're taking in, our responsibility, the desire for certainty versus uncertainty, and a nice balance between that. It really is a holistic situation.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway,
And just to relate that to what I hear from people that come to me as clients that are sick, sometimes chronically sick for years with all kinds of, mystery type illnesses. They want to know, is this because I was exposed to toxic mold? Is it because I have Lyme disease? Is it Epstein-Barr virus? There's all these, even in the functional medicine, holistic world, there's these potential causes. Well, what I've learned through my own, health journey and helping these people heal themselves, really, they're healing themselves, is like you just said, it's never one thing. It's never even two or three things. It's a perfect storm. And, we can go through all the things that happen their whole life, all the hits to their psyche, to their immune system, the toxicities they've been dealt with, which in some people's bodies don't really, flush out and go away. They might be recycling them. They might have the energetic vibration or imprint of those things left in their biofield that then affects how their physical body can work. So it's that onion type thing where to get, there's always some maybe major root causes, but to even get to that, you start to peel off, oh, my father left the family when I was 13. Did that affect me? Yes, that was a huge, trauma that sometimes needs to be healed. And I'm not just talking about talk therapy. Sometimes we can do it in a very easy, energetic
Oh, yeah.
way. But we have to look at all those
That's good.
things
There's
that
lots of modalities, that we can adopt and utilize. And
so
it's
many.
like when it's only relegated to woo-woo, or you shouldn't even consider that, it's problematic. We're missing out on a whole array of things that can help us specifically. Because you know how it is. Certain modalities worked for one person, but didn't work for this person. So you
Absolutely.
gotta go find another modality, right?
Right, right. And we're also individual and different things resonate. So I always ask the client, what are you attracted to? I'm not going to tell you you have to do this therapy or this particular modality. What does your instinct, your gut feeling tell you about that? And then sometimes we use muscle testing or pendulum testing or something to get some information from their subconscious or from source, creator, the all you called it, can give us some
Yeah.
direction too. But I will agree that maybe what's going on right now with this supposed COVID-19 is that we are being bombarded with even more than usual, potentially from, the 5G thing that's, going all over the world, being unleashed more than ever. So that's kind of something that has changed, because we've always had all these threats for many, many years. And that's why so many people get cancer and autoimmune diseases and whatnot. I mean, that's nothing new, but there could be new things creating new levels of disease right now. 5G, Wi-Fi stuff being, big one. And then the mental,
Oh, yeah.
emotional trauma of saying there's a pandemic and you can't go visit grandma, you can't hug your, kids and all that kind of thing. And who knows what else? I mean, I proudly wear the hat of conspiracy theorist because I like to look at all potential conspiracies like chemtrails and crap in our food, heavy metals, in the water and whatnot. There's a myriad of things. And like to your point that you brought up originally, is that human beings are incredibly resilient, that we're even alive still on the planet, despite all the what appears to be a coordinated effort to keep us from thriving. We're barely surviving, a lot of us. But we actually have much more power to heal and to overcome all these adversities than we have been led to believe. And that's my message: is take back your power, realize that there are so many ways to keep I call it ascension, keep ascending in your
That's fine.
vitality, your physical, mental, and emotional and spiritual bodies. So we talked about yesterday the gift of COVID that keeps giving,
Oh,
that it has
absolutely. Yeah,
woken
it
up
is. It is
so many
definitely a
people.
gift.
Right, right. And you found it.
Yeah, I've heard stories of people that were doing the rat race 9 to 5, and because they were forced to go home and spend time with their kids and educate their kids, like we used to do in the not too distant past, he decided not to go back. He's like, no, I'm making perfectly fine money. I'm feeding my family, and I get to spend time with my children. I've actually have gotten to know them for the first time. See, and that's a beautiful thing. That's a gift of COVID right there. If he was not thrust into that situation, no, you go home, he would have never rediscovered, or I'll just say discovered his children. He's seen them for the first time.
Oh,
So, and I think that's panning out for a lot of people because a lot of businesses are on the peninsula are wanting to give signing bonuses. I mean, there's bartenders. Hey, you want to become a bartender? I'll give you $500 and you can start, and then I'll pay you much more than you were paid last time. Just I need some help. No one wants to go back to work, so perhaps it's a good situation. Hopefully, they're not on welfare. Hopefully, they've carved out a little niche for themselves, and they're actually starting their own journey of discovery and taking care of themselves, whether it's monetarily or otherwise.
yeah, I definitely don't want
So
to
that's one thing.
minimize the suffering that some people, many people have experienced over the last 2 years with losing jobs, businesses, being injected by these things. Many, many people have suffered adverse reactions, if not death. So not to minimize any of that, but here's where, I hear this term a lot of times: the dark ends up serving the light, because maybe, if you believe in destiny, maybe this was all meant to happen to give humanity this kind of royal kick in the butt, to wake up to what's going on. We can't keep our heads in the sand. We got to look at the things that have been done to us that have kept us, in slavery pretty much, and poor health and all that. And then don't just complain about it, but take action. And so that's what my health freedom group is all about, is we can commiserate with each other and console each other, cry on each other's shoulders. But then what are we going to do about
Yeah,
it?
fellowship is very important. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to create the new world, whatever you want to call it, parallel societies, new ways of healthcare. And I think Dr. Kaufman, with his True Medicine, all the conferences he's doing, the webinars, the product that he sells now, Shilajit Mumiho, is that how you say it? I just started taking
Yeah,
this.
Shilajit, yeah, Shilajit Mumio. And Mumio, it's mummy. It means body preserving. Shilajit comes from the Himalayas, if you will, and Mumio comes from the Caucasus, that area.
Right.
It's an old Persian term, actually, Mumio is. So the reason why we called it Shilajit Mumio is because ours comes from the Rocky Mountains of America. So to distinguish it from its regional source, why not call it both of those names?
Yeah.
But
Well, I've
it's
been
a
on it
it's a
for.
fantastic, naturally occurring, mineral supplement. So
Yeah, I'm loving it. It's been about 10 days. I'm very sensitive to new products. I can tell when it's working or not working in my body. And just dropping the drops, I do about 7 drops. And I've been feeling really good.
are you taking it? Are you taking it straight?
Straight?
Are you taking it straight?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. In other words, are you putting it in any? Oh yeah. So some people find it very distasteful. It can. If you drink scotch or have consumed scotch in the past and know that there's a tarry component to it, that's kind of what it can be described as. Other people say strong black coffee, but yeah, it takes some getting used to. And of course, if you put it in your favorite tea, or I put it in just distilled water because I don't mind the taste. So um, yeah, you just got to get it in you, right? You got to
Yeah,
get that
I'm
nutrition
hardcore.
because the soils are depleted. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just an example of another thing that has, come out into the world to help people with the detox stuff. So we can't fully escape all this stuff that's coming at us, but we can minimize our exposure. We can step up our, assist our body in detoxing the stuff that's building up. We can meditate, do energy medicine exercises, bioenergetic devices. There's all kinds of stuff to
Oh yeah,
make us as
that's amazing.
resilient as possible. And it's like, okay, dark ones, bring it on, because I'm ready for you.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
and I'm very optimistic. Sometimes when we get into these conversations and people start scratching their heads, like it sounds like there's so many conspiracies and we as humans are being under attack. Well, yeah, but that's okay because as Nietzsche said, right, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger type thing, and it's a truism. We what we need is some reprieve. Again, it's that polarity. You go to the gym, you get hurt, right? You're hurting your muscles. But what's the benefit after that? You get stronger. And so that seems to be a well-established principle. I mean, if you continuously go through the school of hard knocks, eventually you learn your lesson and you now have a skill set of how to cope, and how to contend with a variety of situations. Even if you've never confronted one before, you've got a little bit of experience to know, I bet you I can confront that with the same fortitude as the thing that I have direct experience with.
yeah. So hormesis is that word about a little stress to the body can actually overall make you stronger, and
I'm gonna have to write that down too.
hormesis.
I collect words, so hormesis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Well, so we're going to wrap up with just each of us is going to give you guys a little quick wellness tip that we use for our own vitality. My real easy one that I do every morning is on an empty stomach. I get about 6 to 8 ounces of filtered water. I use a special little device in there to structure it. There's all kinds of ways to structure water now. And then I take an always organic lemon. I squeeze that in there and I drink it. I don't guzzle it, but I drink it over a few minutes. And that really helps with alkalizing the body. It gives you vitamin C, vitamin B, magnesium, calcium, and it's really good for your digestion. It gets you able to make the right kind of bile and liver cleansing. And so I do that every morning. It's very refreshing. And any citrus I feel is like just a happy flavor. It makes you feel happy. So what about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, and prior to knowing that, I was going to say the same thing. That was my choice, the lemon water in the morning. I'm There's several, but I'm only going to do one. Right? I would say it's the mental aspect of it. So meditation, the quieting of the mind. I mean, because just in this conversation alone, look at the bombarding that takes place on ourselves. So even if it's only 5 minutes every day, build up. It's the consistency that's the most important. And all it is simply quieting the mind. You've got a barrage of thoughts. And because of the morphogenic field, like Rupert Sheldrake talks about, those thoughts may not necessarily be of your originality. you know they may be somebody else's thoughts or a collection, right? So what you're simply trying to do is just kind of push that gently aside and be in the moment, be in the now, where you know do your box breathing if you have to. But even if it's only 5 minutes, try to build that up every single day. Do it every day until you reach at least 20 minutes of that quietness. And what I do is, while I'm doing that, I'm getting some sunshine if it exists on the peninsula. You know how
Right.
we usually say sun by one here, right? But lately, it's been a great joy to go out in the morning sun and get grounded and just try to quiet the mind for a minute while the sun bathes my face. So uh, it is medicine. It's honest ancient medicine
Yeah.
for quieting
Thank
that
you.
mind.
Thank you for that. And I like going outside and grounding while you're doing your meditation because that's layering. That's like almost
Yeah.
multitasking, but in a good way. So that, because, there are a number of things we want to try to work into our schedule when we can that are beneficial. And sometimes it's like, how am I going to do it all? Well, if you layer it, like what Jonathan's talking about, you can do multiple things all at once when possible. Yeah, thank you for that. So we're going to wrap up, and I want to say thank you very much, Jonathan. This has been really
Yeah,
great.
you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm going to have you back for sure if
I
you're
love
up.
I love to yeah I love to yak, so it's right up my alley. Oh, and I know you're gonna tell people how they can reach me. Just to go back a little earlier and say, if you're interested in the logical fallacies, there's a great little, well, actually, there's two websites. It's yourlogicalfallacyis.com, because we have to be honest with ourselves and find out where we are biased, right? Also, they have a website called The Thinking Shop, which they have a deck of cards called Creative Thinking. I recommend buying them and playing them as a game with your kids, even. And we do have to teach these young minds how to think, utilizing the trivium, because if you can be critical, you can exercise that much needed muscle called discernment for yourself, so that you can tease out what is right and wrong for you and yours.
Yeah, discernment. That is the most important word of the year in my mind because, you know, so many people are just so confused, especially if they're not dogmatic, they're just hearing all these things from our side and their side. And they're like, who do I believe? Who can I trust? And discernment means trusting yourself, I believe, really tapping into your heart brain coherence. What are you sensing about this issue? So those are great resources. Thank
Excellent.
you. And then, yeah, just if anybody does want to get a hold of Jonathan, the email is Jonathan, JONATHAN, at Andrew Kaufman, KAUFMAN, right? And then my contact info, you can go to my website, newvibrantyou.com. Healthfreedommonterey.com is our website for the Health Freedom. And then you can get my free downloadable gift, actually called the Vibrant Energy Morning Routine. And it's a PDF that is some of my top ways to really, try to stay vibrant and full of energy every day. And you can email me at Ginny, GINNY, at newvibrantyou.com. All righty. Any last parting words, Jonathan?
Yeah, I think I said a mouthful, so I'm ready to shut up now.
Okay, well, yeah, you're a pleasure to have a guest on that really can fill the time and has very interesting things to say. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. It's
All
been an
right.
honor.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you at the next podcast. Turning off recording. Where is it?